Jake Hatch of Locked On Cougars covering all things BYU. Jake, I'll be at the game this week. You'll be at the game this week. BYU, Utah. What makes this rivalry, I'll leave a general off the top, so special?
The fact that it literally exists 24/7, 365 around these parts. It's one of those rivalries, much like many of those ones in the Deep South we talk about all the time, that people just live, eat, and breathe it every single day. And it's in every facet of life here in the state of Utah. I grew up here. My best friend in junior high school, Drake, is a dyed-in-the-wool Utah fan. I grew up a BYU guy. You should have heard some of the arguments we had in junior high, just bickering back and forth about this rivalry. And that's just a microcosm of what this rivalry is. It literally splits families. It is so unique in how it dominates every facet of life here, but it extends itself to the dominant religion around these parts, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. It obviously involves a state school against a religious school. There are so many different facets that it invades, but it is in every facet of life in the Beehive State.
Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, or on second reference, LDS, which could be appropriate here. Moving forward, for sake of brevity, that's where I'll go. But that is such a big part of what I've found going to Provo or going to Salt Lake City, is that buried deep within this rivalry, there is an entire faith aspect that so many schools or rivalries miss out on. And by the way, one of these isn't an inherently religious institution. It's just the fact that the LDS community runs so deep with both universities. How much truly is that at play when these two teams meet on a football field?
It's a play because you have guys who have served missions for the church on both of these squads. A lot of them grew up together playing in the same youth leagues, and they just know each other so well if they're from in-state. And the out-of-state guys come in and they feel it. The fans are talking to them constantly, whether you're a BYU or Utah player, talking about the opposing team and how much you, quote-unquote, hate the other team and you need to go beat them for us.
Yeah.
These conversations happen all the time, Drake. And the thing about it is Brigham Young, who obviously BYU bears his name as their institution's founding member. Guess what? He also founded the University of Utah. So this has existed forever. If you really want to look back at the history of BYU and Utah, the rivalry, the very first time these two schools got together for an athletic endeavor, Drake, it was a baseball game. And in true BYU Utah fashion, it ended in a good old-fashioned brawl. So that should tell you everything that you need to know. That's back in the 1880s, I believe, is when that happened.
That's awesome. Would you argue that Brigham Young's favorite university of the two is BYU?
Well, he's got his name on the university.
That's great. I love the in-state aspect of the players, Jake, because you look at both of these rosters. There are so many Utah guys, and I want to emphasize that is rare anywhere you go in this country. Typically, you look at a roster and it's like, all right, half the team is Texas, California, or Florida, no matter where you are. But there's so much Utah representation of these two teams, and they win football games outside of the state of Utah, but now get to come home and play each other. Talk to me about the state aspect that plays in.
There's family pride at stake that obviously you're putting on for your university. And like I said, a lot of it's baked into the fact that you either grew up in a BYU family or a Utah family, maybe a blended family. Some of them are Utah fans, other ones are BYU, and whichever side you pick, you're putting on for that school, but more importantly, your family. This is a state, Drake, that we're very family oriented out here. We traditionally have very large families. And the thing is, people love being from Utah. There is it's a little brother syndrome, as it were, like a persecution complex as well, maybe in the state of Utah, where it's like Utah against the world. But the state of Utah loves to represent itself on the national stage, and this rivalry is one of the best opportunities to do that. Now, would I have liked to seen this game maybe in a more prime spot TV-wise rather than it being 10:15 Eastern time on a Saturday night? Sure. But there's going to be people who will say, oh, BYU, Utah, they're playing. I'm going to stay up for that game because they know the history of this rivalry and they want to see how these two do battle. Yes, it would have a lot more luster on it if Utah were not on a 4-game losing streak, but this is a rivalry that these two schools and the players that play for them want to put on for their state, want to put on for their family, and more importantly, they just want to put on a show for the nation.
Jake, had you told us preseason that BYU would be a top 10 team going into this game, you would certainly think Utah was there too, or within the region. It created maybe the biggest matchup in the nation this week with College Game Day on hand, but Utah somehow didn't hold up their end of the bargain, and now BYU is favored on the road.
Hey, yes, on that part. So you remember the preseason predictions for the Big 12, right? And Utah was number 1.
I do remember those. Yes, Jake.
BYU's number 13.
Yes, I remember those.
You know where these two schools are this week?
No way.
BYU's number 1.
No way.
Utah's number 13. So there you go.
Oh, that is great. I, too, didn't have faith that BYU would be at this level. And no one did. No one did. 6-6 was my prediction. And many BYU fans have been like, you know what? 6-6, cool. We went to a bowl game. That was the metric that you and I even discussed preseason that Kalani and company needed to hit. And now they are in the top 10. Jake, nationally, is this one of the more underrated rivalries? We talk a lot about like a Wisconsin and Minnesota. Those are two different states, and they don't have this on the line. Should we be talking about it more?
Yeah, I believe so. But like I said, I'm biased. I live here in this state. I've lived with this rivalry my entire life. But I think the biggest thing that held it back, Drake, was the fact that it was in the WAC. It was in the Mountain West. BYU was independent while Utah was in the Pac-12. I think the fact that this is now maybe, well, I believe it's the best rivalry in the Big 12. And this is a league that is starting to garner more and more eyeballs as they continue to kind of beat the crap out of each other every week. This rivalry, I think, is going to take on a newfound respect nationally as these two teams play at the highest level of football now in the Power 4 ranks. So, yeah, I feel like it's been underrated for quite some time, but I think given the time and obviously the platform that this will now give them in the Big 12, you're going to see a new, I think, era of how cool and how, I guess, big this rivalry ends up being registering nationally, because I really do think that these are two teams. They legitimately despise one another in many respects, and they want to get after one another on every single level, and the fans do it better than almost anybody out there, maybe outside of Auburn and Alabama fans. But it really is a rivalry that has been highly, highly underrated for years, and I'm hopeful that in the next 2 to 3 to 5 years, we're going to see this rivalry take on a whole new shape, and the national media will pay more attention to it.
Yeah, Jake, I do believe it's the best rivalry in the Big 12. It's in-state, and it's as heated. Not only is it as heated as it is, but to me, you've seen a history of two schools who have been underrated overall on the national scale. They were so long that the state of Utah did not have a power program based on conference affiliation, yet still one of the two schools would be ranked, or both schools would be ranked. There'd be a way in which one team had some national twist to it, to where everyone was paying attention to the Holy War, and that is what's put it at such prominence. And maybe it's the fact that both were so overlooked that they hated each other to climb the ladder of finally being seen nationally. And Utah got there first into the Pac-12, and BYU got to the Big 12, and now BYU's top 10. Utah's unranked, and we get all of that glory on Saturday. Jake, I can't wait. I'll see you there.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we got tailgate going on just down the street, so I'm going to have you stop by and say what up. All right.
I love it. I will be there. My flight leaves Saturday morning from Savannah, Georgia at 6 a.m. Yeah.
How long are you on the ground for then? All told.
I will land at like 10 a.m.
Okay.
So I've got a full day of just nothing but BYU, Utah, Holy War, from Pig Bus to church. I'm sure they'll have some sort of service pregame somewhere, and I'll find it. Post Pig Bus, I'll probably need it. Jake, where can folks who want to find more of your work go?
Locked On Cougars, wherever you get your podcasts, just like Locked On Big 12, also available on YouTube. Subscribe, as Drake said, because, we like these jobs. We like to keep them long term, so help us out.
Usually.
A humble plea on that side of things. Now, the other thing I wanted to mention is you can find my thoughts on all things social media at Jacob C. Hatch on X, and also the show is on social media, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Locked On Cougars.
Jake Hatch, thanks so much for joining the show. Oh, we're back. Just a little blackout there for fun. This has been It Always Will Be. We'll be talking all week long, including tomorrow on the Big 12 squad, about BYU and Utah. Again, this has been It Always Will Be, a crossover edition of Locked On Cougars and Locked On. Thanks for making it your first listen every single day. Dose Grande.